I stood by the counter, hands still wet from washing the breakfast dishes, when my daughter finally said it. "If you don't want to go to the nursing home, then leave my house." Her words didn't sound angry, they sounded final. Like she'd been practicing them in her head for weeks. I didn't argue. I didn't even blink. I just wiped my hands on the towel, folded it neatly, and smiled. You might think I smiled out of pride, but no. It was the kind of smile that hides the sound of something breaking inside you. The air between us was thick. Her husband, Trent, shifted in his chair, pretending to scroll through his phone, avoiding both our eyes. My grandson's cereal bowl sat untouched, the milk turning warm. Somewhere outside, a lawn mower hummed. The world kept spinning, just not for me. Alana crossed her arms. She looked so much like her father when she did that, strong jaw, determined eyes. The same eyes that used to run to me after nightmares. Now they looked through me. "Mom, it's not safe for you to be alone," she said, softer now. "But it's not working here. You make everyone tense." "I make everyone tense." That line landed harder than the first. 3 years ago, I'd buried my husband, Leonard, after 32 years of marriage. The day after his funeral, Alana asked me to move in, said it would help both of us heal. She'd sounded sincere back then. Now, her kitchen felt smaller, colder. I turned to the window. My reflection looked older than I remembered. Maybe because I was finally seeing myself the way they saw me, an aging woman who took up too much space in a house that wasn't hers. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that I'd already made a decision long before this morning. So when Alana crossed her arms again and said, "You can't just keep pretending everything's fine," I whispered, "I know." Her brows furrowed. "You know?" I smiled again, this time it felt lighter. "Yes, sweetheart. I know." That smile made her uneasy. It always did when she couldn't read me. She opened her mouth to say something, but just then. Honk! Honk! A car stopped outside. Her head turned toward the window. Trent looked up too. I felt the pulse in my wrist quicken. Because I knew that sound. I knew that car. I picked up my small purse from the counter and looked at my daughter one last time. "Don't worry," I said quietly. "You won't have to send me anywhere." Her confusion hung in the air. Then I stepped toward the door, heart racing, the morning sun spilling across the tiles like an omen. As I reached for the knob, Alana's voice trembled, "Mom, where are you going?" I didn't answer. Because sometimes silence speaks louder than sorrow. And as I opened the door, the sunlight hit my face, bright, blinding, and in that light, I swear I heard Leonard's voice whisper, "It's time, Mae." Then I stepped outside. If your own child told you to leave, what would you do? Fight for your place, or walk away with your pride intact? Tell me in the comments, because this story isn't about losing family, it's about finding yourself again. 3 years earlier, I was standing on the same porch, suitcase in hand, staring at my daughter's smiling face. Back then, her words were warm. "Mom, this house will always have a place for you," she'd said. It was spring, the kind that smelled like hope. I'd just sold the house Leonard and I built together. Every wall, every nail had our laughter in it. But I sold it anyway, because Alana said she needed help after Trent lost his job. She called it temporary. I called it love. With the money from the sale, they paid off their mortgage, fixed up the roof, and built a guest room out back just for me. Alana cried when I moved in, saying it felt like we were a real family again. But love, I've learned, can fade quietly, not with shouting, but with silence. At first, everything was perfect. I made breakfast, helped with laundry, read bedtime stories to little Cody. I even planted roses by the fence. Alana said the house hadn't felt this alive in years. Then Trent started working again, and things shifted. It began with little things. The way he'd sigh when he saw my slippers by the couch. The way his tone changed when he said, "Morning, May," without meeting my eyes. Then came the whispers at night, muffled voices behind their bedroom door. "Your mom means well," he'd say, "but it's too much, Alana. We need space." "She's my mother," she'd whisper back. "Yeah, but this is our house." That line always cut deep, even when they thought I couldn't hear. I started keeping to myself. I stopped baking cookies for Cody's lunches. I stayed in my room more. But the quieter I became, the louder the distance grew. Sometimes, when I passed their family photos in the hallway, I noticed I wasn't in any of them. Not one. That's when I realized this wasn't our home. It was a house that forgot love. One night, I sat by my window, holding Leonard's old watch. It had stopped ticking the day he died, but I kept it anyway. It reminded me that even broken things could still be beautiful. I looked out at the yard, at the car in the driveway, a car I helped them buy with what was left of my savings. And for the first time, a quiet thought crossed my mind: what if leaving is the only way to be seen again? That thought scared me. But it also made me feel alive. So I began saving little by little, small withdrawals, hidden away in an envelope behind Leonard's photo frame. Not out of revenge. Out of love, for myself. I didn't know where I'd go. I just knew I wouldn't die invisible. Because the truth is, some homes don't keep you safe. They keep you small. Have you ever given up everything for family, only to realize you'd vanished in the process? Comment yes if you've felt that, because sometimes, the hardest kind of love is letting go. Morning sunlight slipped through the blinds and stretched across the kitchen floor, the only warmth left in that house. I'd been up since 6, frying eggs, cutting fruit, packing Cody's lunch the way Alana liked it: no sugar, no mayonnaise, no grandma recipes. They never asked me to do it, but habits like care don't die easily. Every plate I washed, every bed I made, every floor I swept, it was my way of still belonging. I didn't realize it then, but I was living like a guest who kept trying to earn her stay. "Mom, you don't have to do all this," Alana would say. But her tone wasn't gratitude. It was guilt wearing politeness. I'd nod and say, "I know, honey," then keep scrubbing anyway. Trent would pass through the kitchen, grabbing his coffee with the same distant morning every day. Sometimes he'd open the fridge, glance at what I'd cooked, and close it without a word. Once, he muttered, "Your mom sure likes butter," to Alana, thinking I didn't hear. I pretended not to. But silence builds walls. And in that house, the walls were growing faster than the roses outside. One evening, I was in the kitchen again, setting the table. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, just like I used to make when Leonard came home from the plant. Alana came in, took one look, and sighed. "Mom, Trent's cutting back on carbs." "You didn't have to make all this." "I just wanted to surprise everyone," I said softly. Her lips pressed together. "Yeah, but maybe you should ask next time." Ask. Ask before cooking. Ask before cleaning. Ask before existing. Dinner that night felt like a test I didn't know I was taking. Trent sat at the head of the table, Alana beside him, Cody between them. I sat at the end, my plate untouched. "So, Mom," Trent said between bites, "you ever think about what's next for you?" I looked up. "Next?" He shrugged, cutting into the chicken. "You know. Retirement homes, travel, volunteering, something outside the house." Alana's fork froze midair. "Trent." He smiled, pretending it was casual. "Just saying, May's still young enough to have adventures, right?" His tone was polite, but his eyes were firm, the kind that said, "You've overstayed." I swallowed hard, forcing a smile. "Oh, I've had plenty of adventures. I just never thought one of them would be figuring out where I belong." Cody giggled. "Grandma, you can live with us forever." Trent chuckled awkwardly. Let's not make promises, bud. The rest of dinner was quiet. Even the clock on the wall seemed to tick louder, as if measuring my time left. Later that night, I passed by their bedroom door, just as I heard Alana's voice, low and tired. She'll never move on if she keeps living here. My breath caught. Trent mumbled something I couldn't make out, and then, silence. That sentence echoed in my chest long after I crept back to my room. She'll never move on. As if I were the one holding her back. As if grief was contagious. I sat on my bed, staring at the photo of Leonard on my nightstand. The man who used to call me the pulse of this home. Now, even my own daughter couldn't feel it. Have you ever stayed somewhere so long, you became invisible? If you've ever felt unwanted in a place you helped build, type "I understand" in the comments. Because sometimes love turns into guilt, and guilt turns into distance. The next morning, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Cody was at school. Alana and Trent were at work. I stood in my small room, holding Leonard's old photo frame. His smile was the same one that used to calm every storm. But behind the frame, tucked beneath the wood paneling, something thin brushed my fingers. An envelope. It was yellowed at the edges, sealed, and on the front, in Leonard's careful handwriting, was my name. Mae. My heart stuttered. I hadn't seen his writing since the funeral. I sat down on the bed, the sunlight spilling over my lap, and carefully opened it. Inside was a single page. No grand words, no apologies, just Leonard, being Leonard. Live again, Mae. Don't let grief become your home. The handwriting shook slightly, like he'd written it from his hospital bed. My breath trembled. He must have slipped it into one of our boxes before I moved, and I'd never noticed. For 3 years, I'd been holding on to his absence instead of his memory. That one line, that one simple sentence, changed everything. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel old. I felt unfinished. I looked around my small room, the beige walls, the borrowed furniture, the single picture on the nightstand, and realized this wasn't my life anymore. It was just a waiting room. Leonard's voice seemed to echo in my mind, gentle but firm. Live again. Live how? With what? I walked over to my dresser, pulled out the envelope of cash I'd been saving, the quiet rebellion I'd started months ago. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Then I opened the curtains. The world outside looked wider, brighter. Maybe Leonard wasn't just talking about grief. Maybe he was talking about this house, this life that had stopped feeling like mine. I sat down again, letter in hand, when the phone rang. I hesitated, almost didn't answer. Hello? A warm, familiar voice came through the line. Mae? It's Elliot. Elliot. I hadn't heard that name in over 20 years. He was Leonard's old friend, the one who'd lost his wife before Leonard got sick. He used to stop by with fresh peaches from his orchard. Always smiling, always patient. And after Leonard passed, he'd left me one voicemail. I never returned it. Hearing his voice now felt like opening another door I didn't know was still locked. I was cleaning out some things at the farm, he said. Found some of Leonard's old tools. Figured you might want them. My throat tightened. I didn't know you still had those. Of course I do. Your husband helped me fix half my barn with those hands. He chuckled softly. You should come by. The place looks the same, just a little quieter. I didn't answer right away. My eyes fell to Leonard's letter again, his words glowing in the morning light. Live again. Maybe this was what he meant. Elliot, I said finally, I think I will. The line went silent for a second, then his voice softened. Good. It's been too long, Mae. After the call, I sat still for a long time, the letter trembling in my hands. A tear slipped down my cheek, but it wasn't from sadness. It was from release. The kind that feels like the first breath after being underwater too long. Have you ever found a message that changed how you saw everything? Maybe it was a letter, a photo, a song, something that reminded you who you used to be. Comment what that was, because sometimes healing starts with remembering you're still alive. Elliot's call lingered in my head for days, like the faint scent of rain after a long drought. I found myself smiling again, small, uninvited smiles that caught me off guard. It had been years since someone had spoken to me without pity. Years since someone remembered me before I became grandma or mom. He called again a few days later. "I'm working on something," he said. "Something that might mean something to you too." "What is it?" "You'll see. Just come by the orchard Saturday morning." I hesitated. Leaving the house for anything other than groceries felt rebellious. But Leonard's letter sat folded in my purse like a quiet dare. So I went. The drive out to Elliot's place felt like traveling back in time, past the strip malls and gas stations, into wide fields and open air. When I arrived, Elliot was standing beside a half-built wooden structure. The scent of sawdust mixed with apples in the wind. He waved. "There she is." I laughed softly. "Still building things with your own hands, huh?" "Some habits don't die," he said, brushing sawdust off his jacket. "This," he gestured at the structure, "is a retreat house. A space for people like us. Widows, retirees, folks trying to remember who they were before life told them to slow down." The words hit me deep. "People like us," I repeated. He smiled. "You gave everyone else your best years. Maybe it's time to save a few for yourself." I looked at him, really looked. His hair was more silver now, his face softer, but his eyes were kind, just like before. Something inside me, something buried, stirred. When I got home, Alana was waiting. The car wasn't even parked before she was at the door. "Where have you been?" I froze, holding my purse close. "I went to see an old friend." Her eyes narrowed. "Old friend? You mean that man who dropped you off last week?" "Elliot," I said calmly. "He's your father's old business partner." Alana crossed her arms. "Mom, you barely know him anymore. You can't just go running around like..." "Like what?" She hesitated, then sighed. "Like someone who doesn't have responsibilities." Responsibilities. I wanted to laugh. I'd spent 30 years carrying other people's lives on my back, and now I was irresponsible for wanting an afternoon of sunlight and conversation. Trent appeared from the hallway, holding a beer. "Everything all right here?" Alana gave a strained smile. "Just talking to Mom about boundaries." He nodded. "Good. We need to talk about that soon anyway. She's not staying here forever, babe." The air turned heavy. "Excuse me?" I said quietly. Trent didn't flinch. "You said yourself, May, you want your independence. Maybe it's time you got it." Alana bit her lip. "Trent." "No, he's right," I said softly. "I don't want to be anyone's burden." Trent gave a polite nod and walked off, leaving the tension hanging in his wake. Alana's voice cracked. "That's not what I meant." "Then what do you mean?" She had no answer. I went to my room, closed the door, and sat on the bed, Leonard's letter still tucked inside my purse. I pulled it out again, his words seemed even clearer now. "Don't let grief become your home." Maybe grief wasn't the only thing I'd turned into a home. Maybe I'd made my daughter's pity my address. My phone buzzed. "Elliot. Just checking in. I built something new today. When you're ready to leave, just call me." Leave. That word carried weight, but also freedom. I looked around the room filled with borrowed furniture and stale air, and for the first time in years, I felt ready to breathe again. Have you ever realized the people you love don't see you anymore? Like you've turned into background noise in your own story? If you felt that way, comment still here. Because you are, and maybe that's where healing starts. The next morning began with a sharp knock. Alana didn't wait for an answer before pushing the door open. "Mom, we need to talk." I set down my teacup. "All right." Her arms were crossed, her voice tight. "You've been sneaking around with some stranger, and I need to know what's going on." "Stranger?" I blinked. "You mean Elliot?" "I told you who he is." Alana shook her head. "You told me a version of who he was. You don't really know him anymore." She leaned against the doorframe, eyes darting toward my open purse, Leonard's letter barely visible. "Is he after your money?" she demanded. That one stung. "What money, Alana?" I asked quietly. "You and Trent used it to pay off your mortgage." She flinched. "That's not fair." "No," I said. "It's just true." Her lips pressed tight. "You're too trusting, Mom. Too old to see when people are using you." There it was. Too old. That phrase didn't just land, it buried itself deep. I stood up, my voice shaking, not from anger but from something older. "You talk to me like I'm a guest in my own life. Like I should be grateful you let me stay here." "I didn't mean." "Yes, you did." Silence. The kind that fills every corner of a house and makes it echo. I took a slow breath. Elliot is not a stranger. He's a man who remembers me, the way your father did. He looks at me and still sees a person. Alana blinked fast, tears rising, but she turned away before they fell. "You don't know everything about me, Alana," I said softly. She spun around. "Then tell me. What don't I know?" The words were too sharp, too loud. And for a moment, she wasn't my daughter, she was a woman terrified of losing control. I took a step closer. "You don't know what it's like to bury the man who built your world, and then live with the echo of his voice in a house that no longer feels like home." She looked away, jaw tight. "I stayed," I continued, "because I thought being near you would make the ache smaller. But all it did was remind me that I raised someone who forgot how to listen." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Mom, that's not fair." "Maybe not," I said. "But neither is this." I gestured around, the spotless house, the quiet tension, the walls that never welcomed me. Alana's shoulders sank. "You really think I don't love you?" "I think," I said gently, "you love me in the way people love old photos, with nostalgia, not presence." That broke something in her eyes. She left the room without another word, the sound of her footsteps fading down the hall. I sat back down on the bed, my hands trembling, and whispered to myself, "You don't know everything about me, Alana." Because she didn't. She didn't know about the small investments Leonard left me, the quiet nest egg she thought was gone. She didn't know that the woman she called weak was planning to start over. And she definitely didn't know that when Elliot said, "When you're ready to leave," I'd already decided what I was leaving for. Have you ever reached that point where silence hurts more than leaving? When you realize staying small just to keep peace is the loudest kind of heartbreak? Tell me in the comments, would you have stayed or walked away? Birthdays used to mean laughter. The smell of candles, icing, and Leonard's off-key singing. But this one felt different. Forced smiles. Stiff hugs. A celebration built on politeness, not joy. It was Alana's son's 10th birthday, and I wanted it to be special. I woke up early, before sunrise, tying my old apron like a ritual. The kitchen smelled like vanilla and brown sugar, like home. I whisked, baked, layered, and wrote his name across the frosting in careful blue cursive, "To my favorite boy, love Grandma." When Alana came downstairs, I smiled. "Think he'll like it?" She hesitated, then smiled thinly. Of course, Mom. But her eyes didn't match her words. By afternoon, the house filled with guests, neighbors, Trent's coworkers, Alana's friends. Children ran through the yard, their laughter echoing like music I wasn't invited to dance to. I carried the cake out, proud, nervous, happy. But just as I reached the table, Trent appeared holding a box. A tall, glossy bakery cake, frosted perfectly, store-bought perfection. He grinned. Surprise! Thought we'd go professional this year. The guests clapped. Alana forced a laugh. And there I was, holding my homemade cake like an old photograph nobody wanted to see anymore. Someone asked, "Who made the other one?" Trent shrugged. "Oh, her mom likes to bake sometimes. It's sweet." Sweet. That word, small, patronizing, sharp as glass. I smiled anyway, because that's what mothers do. I set the cake aside, quietly placed it near the window. No one noticed when I slipped upstairs. That night, after the laughter died and the house went quiet, I sat in the dark. From the hallway, I heard Trent's voice. "Babe, she's not okay. She's forgetting things. Maybe it's time to start looking for a nursing home." My chest tightened. Alana's voice followed, softer, conflicted. "She just needs time." "But maybe you're right." My throat burned. So this was it, the plan spoken behind closed doors. I turned toward the window where my reflection looked older, smaller. The cake I made sat untouched on the counter below, the frosting melting under the kitchen light. I went to my room, pulled open the drawer, and took out Leonard's letter once more. The paper was worn at the folds now, a map I'd read too many times, but never followed. "Live again, Mae. Don't let grief become your home." My tears hit the ink. Maybe Leonard wasn't talking about his death anymore. Maybe he was warning me about this, the quiet kind of death that comes from being erased while still breathing. I folded the letter, kissed the paper, and whispered to the silence. Maybe it's time I finally listen. Have you ever given your whole heart to a family, only to feel like a guest in their happiness? The kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being alone, but from being invisible? If you've ever felt that, comment "I see you." Because I do. It's strange how control doesn't come all at once. It arrives disguised as care. It started years ago, just after Leonard passed. I was lost then, drowning in bills and paperwork. Alana stepped in, efficient and calm. "Let me help you, Mom. You don't need to worry about this stuff." She paid my bills, managed my accounts. At first, it felt like love. Until I realized every favor came with a condition. "Mom, I'll handle your grocery list, but you don't need to drive anymore." "Mom, I paid the phone bill, you don't really need that old plan." "Mom, I'm just helping." You can't do everything alone. Each gesture took something, a little freedom here, a little dignity there. And I let it happen. Because guilt is a quiet leash. Back in the present, the air in the house had changed. Alana moved through rooms like someone holding a secret. Trent avoided eye contact altogether. I decided to do laundry, small, ordinary, safe. But when I opened the back door, I froze. My favorite plant, a soft green philodendron Leonard had given me years ago, was gone. I found it beside the trash bin, its leaves bent and broken. "Trent?" I called out. He appeared, phone in hand. "Yeah? Did you throw out my plant?" He frowned. "Oh, that old thing? It was dying, Mae. Figured it was time to let it go." Time to let it go. He said it like mercy. But it felt like erasure. I knelt beside the bin, hands trembling as I lifted the broken leaves. Tiny roots dangled like veins, fragile but alive. I whispered, "Not yet." I brought it inside, repotted it in a smaller vase, and placed it by my window. The sunlight caught its bruised leaves, still green, still trying. Just like me. That evening, Alana came to my door. She lingered, unsure. "Mom, can we talk?" I nodded. She sat on the bed, avoiding my eyes. "I don't want you to think we don't appreciate you. You've done so much. But Trent's right. You need your own space." "Space?" I said. "Or distance." She flinched. "It's not like that." "It's exactly like that," I whispered. She sighed. "You're taking this the wrong way. I don't want to lose you. But I can't live like this forever." Her words hung between us, the quiet confession of someone torn between duty and discomfort. I looked at her, my little girl, now a woman afraid of her own mother's shadow. "I know, Alana," I said softly. "You love me the best way you know how. But sometimes love and control wear the same perfume." She blinked, tears forming. "Mom." I touched her hand. "You don't have to explain. Just let me breathe." She nodded, but her grip lingered, as if letting go might make her lose control completely. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet, that heavy kind of silence that hums beneath the skin. I stared at Leonard's letter on the nightstand. Then my phone buzzed. "Elliot." "May," his voice said, steady but urgent. "I need you to come by tomorrow. There's something I've been meaning to show you." "What is it?" He paused. "It's time." "Time for what?" "You'll see." The line clicked off. I sat there for a long time, listening to the rhythm of the house, Alana's soft breathing down the hall, the hum of the refrigerator, the whisper of leaves against glass. Something inside me, small, quiet, brave, began to move. Sometimes love feels like a cage made of good intentions. You tell yourself it's safety until you realize it's just fear dressed as care. Have you ever had to take your life back from someone you loved? Tell me in the comments, what was the moment you knew you had to leave? The road curved along the coast like a secret. The morning light spilled through the windshield, painting Elliot's silver hair gold. We didn't talk much. The hum of the car and the rhythm of the waves were enough. When he finally slowed to a stop, I looked out and forgot how to breathe. It wasn't a grand place, not yet. Just a stretch of coastal land, a few small cottages still under construction, wind-blown grass bending toward the sea. But something about it felt alive, like hope had roots here. Elliot stepped out first. "Come on. I want to show you something." I followed him along a gravel path that led to a nearly finished cottage. The scent of pine and salt water mingled in the air. Inside, the sunlight fell across empty rooms, catching on dust motes that floated like memories. He turned to me. "Do you remember what Leonard used to say?" I smiled faintly. "He said walls should never close people in, they should open them up." Elliot nodded. "That's what this is. A place for people like you, like us. Widows, caregivers, people who gave their lives to others and forgot they were still allowed to live their own." I looked around again. "It's beautiful." He laughed softly. "It will be. I just need help finishing it." "Help?" He handed me a rolled blueprint. "I can handle the wood and nails. But you know what people need. You've built homes your whole life, May. Even in grief, you built comfort around others. Leonard used to say you were the soul of every house you walked into." My heart twisted at his name. "You talked to him about me?" "All the time." Elliot's voice softened. "He told me once, if May ever forgets who she is, remind her she's the light, not the shadow." For a long time, I couldn't speak. The sound of the ocean filled the silence. Finally, I whispered, "I don't know if I remember how to start over." He smiled, not pitying, but proud. Then start small. Help me plant the gardens. Run the kitchen. Name the cottages. This isn't charity, Mae. It's purpose. I turned toward the open window, the breeze brushing my face. I imagined laughter here, people rebuilding, rediscovering, healing. For the first time in years, I didn't feel old. I felt new. What made you build this? I asked. Elliot's eyes softened. Grief. Same as you. But grief doesn't have to end in silence. He reached into his pocket and handed me a small ring of keys. My fingers brushed the cool metal. What's this? He smiled. The main cottage. It's already in your name. I froze. Elliot, No strings, he interrupted gently. Leonard and I started this project together before he passed. His investment helped me buy the land. His part belongs to you now. I looked at the keys again, trembling. The name Mae Hollis engraved on a small brass tag. He wanted you to keep building people, Elliot said. Not walls. The ocean roared louder in the distance, as if agreeing. I turned to him, tears blurring the horizon. I don't know what to say. He smiled softly. Say yes. I did. Have you ever stood in a place that felt like freedom and realized you'd been waiting for it your whole life? If you've ever been given a second chance when you thought your story was over, type yes, I believe in new beginnings. When I got home that evening, the air in the house felt wrong, thick, electric. Alana was sitting at the kitchen table, Leonard's letter open beside a colorful brochure. The one Elliot had given me. Her voice was sharp when she spoke. What is this? I took a slow breath. It's something new. Something I'm going to help with. She held up the brochure. A retirement community? Are you kidding me? You're letting that man fill your head with hope? I said quietly. Because that's all it is. Hope. Her jaw tightened. Mom, you can't just trust people like that. He's clearly taking advantage of your grief. I stepped closer. He's honoring it. There's a difference. Trent came in, sensing the tension. What's going on? She's planning to move out, Alana said, almost laughing. To run some widow camp with Dad's old partner. Trent folded his arms. That's not a good idea, Mae. You've got stability here. Why risk that? Stability. That word again, like a lock on a door I never agreed to. I'm not risking anything, I said. I'm reclaiming something. Alana slammed the brochure down. You think I ruined your life, don't you? The words hit me like a slap. I stared at her, my daughter, shaking with anger and fear. No, I said quietly. I think I stopped living mine for you. Her lips parted. That's not fair. Neither is watching your mother fade so you can feel secure. Tears welled in her eyes. I didn't ask you to stay. Yes, you did, I whispered. Not with words, but with guilt. Every sigh, every don't worry about it, Mom. You built your comfort on my silence. Trent stepped forward, his tone cold. Maybe it's time she leaves, Alana. She's made up her mind. For a second, even Alana looked startled. Trent. No, he said firmly. You've been saying it for months. She deserves her space. I watched them, the couple I'd tried to protect, the family I'd tried to keep whole, unravel into quiet blame. I realized then that love can turn into habit, and habit can turn into a prison. I nodded slowly. You're right. It's time. The room went still. Alana's tears spilled. Mom, please don't do this out of anger. I smiled sadly. I'm not angry. I'm awake. I turned, walked down the hall, and opened my closet. The same old brown suitcase waited in the corner, the one I'd used when I moved in. I brushed off the dust, placed Leonard's letter inside, and folded a few clothes neatly. Every sound, the zipper, the soft thud of shoes, the creak of the floor, felt final. Alana appeared in the doorway, eyes red. Where will you go? I smiled gently. Somewhere that feels like mine again. She looked down. Will you come back? When you start visiting me as your mother, not your obligation. Her shoulders shook. I'm sorry. I stepped forward, brushing a tear from her cheek. So am I. But sometimes sorry isn't enough, you have to let go. She nodded, silent. I carried the suitcase to the front door. The same door I'd walked through years ago with boxes and grief. Now, I walked out with one small bag in peace. Sometimes the hardest goodbye isn't to a person, it's to the version of yourself that stayed too long. If you've ever had to walk away to survive, type I understand in the comments. Because this part of the story is for you. I never thought peace could sound like silence. But that morning, as I zipped my suitcase shut, it did. The same house that once echoed with laughter now felt hollow, like a shell that had forgotten who lived inside it. I stood in the doorway of the kitchen where the story began, sunlight spilling across the tiles. Alana was there again, arms folded, the same expression of tired authority she used to give her teenage son. Her words came out sharp and trembling, if you don't want to go to the nursing home, then leave my house. There it was, the sentence that would end everything. But instead of pain, I felt something else rising inside me. Not anger. Not fear. Just peace. I looked at her for a long moment. Her jaw was tight, eyes glistening but stubborn. I realized she wasn't trying to be cruel, she was just afraid. Afraid of losing control, of losing me, of facing her own reflection in the woman she'd learned to command. I set the suitcase down and straightened my coat. All right, sweetheart. Her eyes widened. What? I said all right, I repeated softly. You're right. It's time. The words hung between us like smoke, heavy, strange, irreversible. She blinked, caught off guard. You mean you're really leaving? I smiled, and it wasn't forced this time. It was the kind of smile that comes when your heart finally exhales after holding its breath for too long. Yes. I am. For a moment, she looked 10 years younger, like the little girl who used to run to me after nightmares. But she didn't speak. Maybe she didn't know what to say, or maybe she was afraid of what she'd feel if she tried. I walked to the window. The morning light fell on the backyard where we used to barbecue with Leonard. The swing set still stood, creaking faintly in the wind. A piece of ribbon from last year's birthday still clung to it, faded, forgotten. Life leaves traces, I thought. But sometimes you have to walk away before you disappear inside them. Have you ever reached the point where silence feels safer than explaining yourself again? When peace finally matters more than being understood? If you've ever been there, just type I know that feeling. I turned back toward Alana. You don't have to explain, honey, I said gently. We both know this moment was coming. She shook her head. Mom, please. But I raised a hand. No more apologies. I'm done collecting them. I'm choosing something else now. What? She whispered. Freedom. The word seemed to startle her, as if it didn't belong to women my age. She looked down at the floor, tears glinting. I never meant to hurt you. I know, I said. But sometimes meaning well isn't enough. Sometimes love turns into fear without us noticing. And fear makes us cruel. Her lips quivered. You sound like Dad. A soft laugh escaped me. He'd be glad you remember how he sounded. I picked up my suitcase. It felt lighter than I expected, maybe because the heaviest things I carried were never in it. As I moved toward the front door, I heard her whisper, "Where will you go?" I turned, hand on the handle. To where I'm wanted. To where I can still give without disappearing. Outside, a sound broke through the stillness, a distant honk. Sharp, clean, familiar. My chest tightened. Alana frowned. "Who's that?" I didn't answer right away. I stepped out onto the porch. The crisp air hit my face, cool and alive. Down the driveway, a sleek car shimmered in the sunlight, silver, polished, and out of place in this quiet neighborhood. The window rolled down slowly, and there he was, Elliot, smiling the way only someone who understands your scars can. For a heartbeat, I just stood there, suitcase in hand, the breeze lifting my hair. It felt like the universe had rehearsed this moment for years. He got out, waved, and called out, "You ready?" I turned back toward the house. Alana stood in the doorway, frozen, part disbelief, part guilt, part something else. Maybe realization. "Mom," she whispered. I smiled again, the same calm, knowing smile that started it all. "It's all right, sweetheart. I found my ride." And I meant it. Sometimes life gives you the same moment twice, once as a wound, once as a test. The first time, it broke me. This time, I smiled. I stepped off the porch, the gravel crunching beneath my shoes. Each step sounded like a release, a quiet goodbye to years of holding back words. Elliot met me halfway. He didn't say much, just took the suitcase from my hand like it was a sacred thing, placed it gently in the trunk, and opened the passenger door. "Are you sure?" he asked softly. I looked back one last time. Alana stood in the doorway, arms hanging at her sides, the morning sun wrapping her in gold. "Yes," I said. "For once in my life, I'm sure." I slid into the car. The leather seat was warm. The air smelled faintly of sea salt, a promise of the coast waiting ahead. As the engine hummed to life, Elliot looked over. "You okay?" I smiled, gazing out the window as the house grew smaller behind us. "Better than okay. You never know when life will hand you your second chance, and if you hesitate, it might drive away. Don't miss stories like this one. Subscribe so you're ready when the next twist comes." The car rolled down the street, the neighborhood fading behind us, mailboxes, fences, memories. In the distance, I could almost hear Leonard's voice in the wind, "Keep building, Mae." And I whispered back, "I am." I used to believe freedom came with noise, celebration, applause, a grand moment. But when it finally came for me, it arrived in silence, and the low hum of an engine pulling up outside the house I no longer called home. The sound stopped me mid-step. Through the sheer curtain, sunlight glinted off silver, a Mercedes, gleaming against the cracked driveway. The air inside the house thickened. I could feel Alana behind me, her breath sharp, her confusion heavy. The car door opened, and Elliot stepped out. He looked just as he had that day at the coastal site, steady, calm, the kind of man who carried peace like other people carried pride. He wore a charcoal jacket, pressed slacks, a blue shirt that made his gray hair look like silver. But what struck me wasn't how he looked. It was how he saw me, as if he'd been waiting all along for this exact moment. He walked up to the gate, his hand resting on the latch. And when he smiled, something inside me unlocked. "Morning, Mae," he said. His voice was warm, gentle, like sunlight through rain. "You ready, love?" For a second, I forgot how to breathe. That word, love, landed softly, but it shook everything inside me. Not romantic, not rushed. It was respect dressed as affection. Behind me, Alana's voice cracked through the moment. Who is that?" Her tone carried disbelief, fear, and something else I couldn't name, maybe the sting of realizing she didn't know her own mother anymore. I turned to her slowly. She stood frozen in the doorway, one hand clutching the frame. Her husband, Trent, peeked from the hallway, whispering something I didn't care to hear. "This is Elliot," I said calmly. "A friend." Elliot smiled at her, polite but distant. "Good morning, ma'am." Alana didn't reply. She just stared, as if the world had turned upside down and her mother was the one standing right side up. I looked back at him and felt my lips curve into a quiet smile. "I've been ready for a long time," I said. And I meant every word. Have you ever reached the moment where you realize you've already said goodbye 1,000 times before you ever walked away? If you've ever felt that peace before the storm, comment "I felt that too." Elliot reached for my suitcase without a word. His hands brushed mine, strong, steady, familiar. It wasn't the touch of a savior. It was the touch of someone saying, "You can stand now. You don't need rescuing anymore." As he loaded the suitcase into the trunk, I turned toward the house one last time. The curtains fluttered in the breeze. The hallway where I once rocked Alana to sleep now felt small, almost foreign. And in that moment, I realized something simple but painful: this house had never been mine. It had been a refuge, yes. But also a cage, built out of good intentions and unspoken guilt. Alana's voice trembled. "Mom, you can't just leave like this." I stepped closer to her. The morning sun fell across her face, the same face I once kissed before her first day of school. She looked terrified. "I already left," I said softly. "I just stayed too long afterward." Her eyes filled with tears. "He's a stranger." I shook my head. "No, honey. A stranger is someone who lives with you and never truly sees you." For a heartbeat, she looked as if she might break. Her lips parted, but no words came. Then Trent muttered something, "Let her go if she wants to." Elliot's jaw tightened, but he stayed quiet. I didn't. "Trent," I said, turning to him, "I hope one day you learn that kindness doesn't make a person weak. It's what keeps them human." He looked away. I glanced back at Alana. "You'll understand someday," I whispered. "When you realize love isn't about keeping someone close. It's about letting them breathe." Her tears finally fell. "I just didn't want to lose you." I smiled, that same quiet, knowing smile that had carried me through every storm. You can't lose what was never yours to keep. When you raise children, you teach them to walk. But no one prepares you for the day you have to walk away first. Elliot opened the car door. The sunlight caught on the chrome, glinting like the edge of a new chapter. I took one last breath, deep, calm, forgiving. "I'll call you," I said gently. "When I'm ready." Alana nodded, her lips trembling. "Where are you going?" "To finish what your father started," I said. Then I turned, walked to the gate, and paused. The metal was cool beneath my hand. I remembered the first time Leonard built this fence, the smell of paint, the way he laughed when I said the gate squeaked like an old song. I pushed it open. It creaked again. Still the same tune. As I stepped through, I felt the world expand, the sky wider, the air fresher, the weight on my shoulders gone. Elliot waited by the car, the passenger door open. "You okay?" I nodded. "I'm free." He smiled. "Then let's go home." The word home made me blink back tears. Not the house behind me, but the one waiting ahead, by the sea, by the light, by the work I still had left to do. They say freedom begins with a door closing. But sometimes, it begins with a gate opening. What do you think happens when Mae reaches the haven? Comment your guess below, and subscribe if you've ever needed to find your own gate. As the car pulled away, I looked back through the window one last time. Alana still stood there, barefoot on the porch, eyes glassy. She raised her hand halfway, not quite a wave, not quite a goodbye. I lifted my hand too, resting it against the glass. Maybe someday she'd understand that leaving wasn't abandonment. It was love's final act of truth. The wind rushed past the car, whispering through my hair. Elliot reached over, resting his hand lightly on mine. "You did the hardest part," he said. I smiled, watching the road unfold before us. "No, Elliot. The hardest part was waiting this long to do it." The ocean always smelled like forgiveness. Salty, endless, alive. As Elliot's car wound along the coastal road, the morning sun danced across the waves, scattering gold over blue. The air through the open window felt different, lighter, almost curious, as if the wind itself was whispering, "You made it." For the first time in years, I wasn't driving toward someone else's expectations. I was driving toward my own beginning. Elliot glanced at me with a soft grin. "You're quiet." I smiled, watching the sea stretch endlessly beside us. "I'm listening." "To what?" "The sound of my life coming back." He chuckled, eyes on the road. "Then I'll keep it quiet." The car curved around a final bend, and there it was. Harborview Haven. A cluster of pale cottages sat overlooking the sea, their roofs silver in the sun. Wind chimes danced between them, and the air carried the scent of wild rosemary and salt. A wooden sign arched over the gate, "A place to begin again." I felt my throat tighten. "This is what you were building?" I whispered. Elliot parked the car and nodded. "You helped build it, Mae. Every time you told me what people like us needed, space, laughter, a reason to wake up again, that became this." We stepped out of the car. The gravel crunched underfoot, and a gull cried overhead. A few women sat on a porch nearby, sharing coffee and sunlight. One waved shyly. Another smiled like she'd been waiting for me. Elliot turned toward me. "You ready to see your office?" "Office?" I laughed. I thought I was just volunteering. He pulled a small brass key from his pocket. "You don't volunteer for your own dream, Mae. You run it. Sometimes, we don't need someone to give us a new life. We just need someone to hand us the key to one." If you believe second chances can bloom at any age, type "I believe in new beginnings" in the comments. We walked through the courtyard, past a garden where someone had already planted rows of herbs. Lavender brushed my fingers, soft and fragrant. In the center stood a fountain shaped like open hands, water flowing gently from palm to palm. "It's beautiful," I whispered. Elliot's voice softened. "It's alive because it remembers what pain looks like, and still chooses beauty." He led me into a small office overlooking the sea. On the desk sat a single item, a rosebush in a clay pot, roots still damp with soil. "I thought you might like to plant the first one yourself," he said. I touched the leaves, young, green, hopeful. Leonard used to say roses were stubborn. They bloom even when everything else gives up. "Then it sounds like you," Elliot said gently. I smiled through tears. Maybe. Days turned into weeks. I woke each morning to the sound of gulls and laughter. I planted, painted, cooked, and listened to the stories of women who had been told their best years were behind them. One had lost her husband after 50 years. Another had spent a decade caring for a mother who no longer remembered her name. We sat together at twilight, knitting, sharing coffee, sometimes just sitting in silence, the kind that heals instead of hurts. Elliot called them the builders. "Because every one of you is building something again," he'd say. And for the first time, I laughed without guilt. Not the quiet, careful laugh of a guest in someone else's home, but a full, open laugh that came from somewhere deeper. I began keeping Leonard's letter on my desk, not as a reminder of loss, but as proof of promise. "Live again, Mae. Don't let grief become your home." I finally understood what he meant. He wasn't asking me to forget him, he was asking me to keep becoming the woman he fell in love with. They say time heals everything. But the truth is, time only heals what you let go of. What are you still holding on to? One morning, while showing a new resident around, I caught a glimpse of myself in a window. The woman in the glass didn't look broken anymore. Her shoulders were straight, her eyes steady, her smile unforced. She looked like someone who had walked through fire and found the sea waiting on the other side. That night, we held our first community dinner under strings of light. The tables were set with simple food, soup, bread, laughter. Elliot stood to make a toast. To the ones who thought they were too late, he said, raising his glass. Turns out, we were right on time. Everyone clinked glasses. The sound was soft, but it felt eternal. As the stars began to appear, I wandered toward the garden. The first rosebush had begun to bloom, petals deep crimson, trembling in the wind. I knelt and whispered, "We did it, Leonard." The waves below echoed softly against the cliffs. I closed my eyes, feeling both the ache of the past and the peace of the present, the way pain and beauty often hold hands. Then, from inside the building, I heard my phone buzz. I stood, brushed the soil from my hands, and went to check. A single message glowed on the screen. From Alana. My chest tightened. I hesitated before opening it, part of me afraid it would reopen the wound I'd just begun to heal. The screen blinked as I tapped it. Mom! I saw the place online. The Haven. It's beautiful. Can I come visit? I stared at the words until they blurred. The world went still except for the ocean, the endless rhythm of forgiveness rolling in from the deep. Elliot stepped outside just then, holding 2 mugs of tea. You okay? I looked up at him, tears shining in my eyes. She wants to come. He smiled softly. Then maybe she's ready to begin again, too. What would you do, open your heart, or protect your peace? When the person who hurt you finally reaches out, do you let them in, or let them learn? The sea was calm that morning, almost unnervingly still, like it was holding its breath with me. I sat on the porch of my cottage at Harborview Haven, wrapped in a soft gray shawl, sipping tea that had long gone cold. The sun had just risen above the horizon, painting the water in streaks of honey and gold. The air was crisp enough to make every exhale visible. It was supposed to be an ordinary morning. But then my phone buzzed on the table beside me. I glanced at the screen, expecting one of the residents, maybe Elliot. But it wasn't. It was Alana. For a second, I just stared at her name glowing on the glass, my heart doing that strange, reluctant dance between longing and fear. I hadn't heard from her since the day I left her house, the day she told me to choose between her home and my freedom. The silence since then had been both a wound and a relief. Now, here it was, her voice breaking through the quiet, digital but trembling with something human. I opened the message. I saw the news. You look beautiful, Mom. I'm sorry for everything. Can I visit? The words hit me like a wave, gentle, unexpected, yet strong enough to shake the ground beneath me. Beautiful. Sorry. Visit. Each word carried its own weight. Each one cracked something open inside me that I didn't even know was still sealed. I sat back in the chair, phone trembling slightly in my hand. My throat tightened, and my eyes blurred before I even felt the tears fall. I whispered into the quiet, she saw the news. A local reporter had done a small feature on Harborview Haven the week before, calling it a home built by a mother who found a new way to love. They'd taken a photo of me standing by the rosebush I planted that first day, the same one now climbing the garden fence with wild beauty. Maybe Alana had seen that picture. Maybe she'd seen something in my face that she hadn't seen before, peace. For a long time, I didn't move. The phone rested in my lap, screen still glowing. I could have answered right away. I could have said, yes, come anytime, like the mother I used to be, the one who always bent, always forgave without question. But the truth was, I wasn't that woman anymore. Forgiveness isn't saying it's okay. It's saying, it's over. Sometimes, the kindest thing you can do is love someone from a distance, until both hearts are ready. If you understand that kind of love, comment I forgive, but I remember. I wiped a tear from my cheek and took a deep breath. The sea beyond the fence sparkled like liquid light. The world looked forgiving, not because it had forgotten, but because it had accepted. I unlocked the phone and started typing, slowly, carefully, the way one writes a prayer. One day, sweetheart. When you're ready to come as my daughter again, not my keeper. I read the words over and over before pressing send. They didn't come from anger. They came from peace. From the kind of strength that doesn't need to prove itself anymore. When the message sent, I placed the phone face down on the table and looked out toward the sea. The tide was rising, waves inching closer to the rocks. It reminded me of time, how it always returns, washing over what once seemed permanent. Elliot's footsteps sounded behind me. He carried 2 mugs of coffee, his easy smile as familiar as the morning sun. "You're up early," he said softly, handing me a mug. "Trouble sleeping?" I shook my head. "Just thinking." He took the chair beside me, his presence quiet, steady. For a while, we didn't speak. The world didn't need words just yet. Finally, he looked at the phone on the table and back at me. "Her?" I nodded. He hesitated. "Do you miss her?" The question floated between us, heavy but kind. I let the silence answer for a moment before saying, "Every day." My voice cracked on the last word. "Every day," I repeated more quietly. Elliot didn't offer advice or sympathy, he just reached over and covered my hand with his. That simple gesture said everything. It's strange, isn't it? You can miss someone and still know that letting go was the right choice. Love doesn't always mean staying, sometimes it means stepping away before both hearts turn cold. We sat there until the sun climbed higher, burning away the morning mist. A few of the residents began to appear, one watering her flowers, another sweeping the walkway. Laughter floated across the courtyard. Life was moving forward, as it always does. And for once, I didn't feel left behind. I looked down at my hand resting under Elliot's and thought of Leonard's letter again, live again, May. I was living again. Not perfectly. Not painlessly. But honestly. Behind the horizon, a gull soared across the water, free, small, unafraid. That was me now. The phone buzzed once more, lighting up the table. Another message from Alana. "I'll wait until you're ready too. I love you." I smiled. Not a triumphant smile, not "I told you so." But a soft, aching smile of understanding. Maybe healing didn't happen in grand reunions or tearful apologies. Maybe it started here, in small, simple words sent across a digital sea, carrying the promise of someday. I stood and walked toward the garden, coffee still warm in my hand. The rosebush shimmered in the light, one new bud just beginning to open. I touched the petal gently. "She's trying," I whispered. "And that's enough." Elliot joined me at the fence, his hand resting lightly on my shoulder. "She'll find her way," he said. "I know," I replied. "So will I." The sun melted into the sea like a slow-burning ember, and the whole sky turned the color of forgiveness, orange, gold, and a touch of violet sorrow. May sat on the porch with Elliot beside her, their chairs angled toward the horizon. Between them, a small glass candle flickered, its flame steady despite the ocean breeze. For the first time in years, she didn't light it out of grief. She lit it out of peace. The candle wasn't for Leonard anymore. It wasn't for Alana either. It was for her, the woman she had become, after every tear, every silence, every goodbye. The porch was quiet except for the faint hum of the tide below and the distant laughter of Harborview Haven's residents, the sound of life continuing, soft but strong. Birds wheeled in the distance, dipping toward the fading sun, and May whispered, half to herself, half to the light, "Funny how you spend years trying to be understood, only to find peace in understanding yourself." Elliot smiled, glancing sideways at her. That sounds like something you'd write on the plaque out front. Mae chuckled softly. Speaking of which, have you seen it today? He nodded toward the gate. They finished it this morning. They both rose and walked together down the path lined with jasmine and roses, plants Mae had tended with patient hands. The scent filled the air, a sweet reminder that growth always takes time. At the gate, the plaque gleamed in the dying sunlight. Its simple inscription read, "Built by hands that once trembled and found peace again." Mae traced the words with her fingers, feeling their truth ripple through her. She remembered the day those hands trembled, the day she packed her bag, left her daughter's house, and stepped into the unknown. They trembled when she signed the papers to buy this land. They trembled when she laid the first brick. And now, years later, they trembled again, but only because her heart was full. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering, without bitterness. Mae turned toward the sea, candle still glowing softly in her hand. You know, she said to Elliot, I used to think peace meant silence. No arguments, no pain, no reminders. But now I think, peace is a conversation you have with yourself, one that finally ends kindly. Elliot nodded. And have you had that conversation? Mae smiled. Every day since I stopped waiting for someone else to start it. They stood in silence for a moment, two souls who had both been broken, both rebuilt. The wind tugged gently at Mae's shawl, and the candle flame wavered but did not go out. Elliot looked at it, then at her. You know, that candle's stronger than it looks. Mae tilted her head. Maybe it's not the candle. Maybe it's the air around it that's changed. He laughed quietly. Maybe so. If someone you love pushes you away, don't chase them in anger. Sometimes, the most powerful act of love is walking away with grace. Mae walked back to the porch and set the candle down on the small wooden table beside her chair. The flame shimmered against the reflection of the sea, two lights dancing together, one human, one eternal. As twilight deepened, visitors began to pass through the gates of Harborview Haven. Some were families, some were volunteers, some were residents' loved ones coming to share dinner. Almost all of them paused at the plaque. Some smiled. Some touched it gently. And a few whispered words only they could hear. Mae watched them, realizing that her pain had grown roots, and those roots had become shelter for others. Maybe healing isn't about what you get back. Maybe it's about what you give forward. Elliot returned from inside the house with 2 mugs of tea. Chamomile, your favorite, he said. She accepted it, smiling. You remembered. I listen, he said with a wink. They sat together again, watching as the first stars began to appear. The ocean darkened, the world softened. Mae's thoughts wandered to Alana, not with pain, but with hope. She pictured her daughter looking up at the same stars from wherever she was, thinking of the same things. Distance didn't feel like punishment anymore. It felt like space to grow. Mae whispered softly, she'll find her way back, one day. Elliot nodded. And when she does? Mae looked at the candle, its light dancing in her eyes. I'll be right here, not waiting, just welcoming. There comes a time when you stop asking, why did they hurt me? And start saying, thank you for showing me who I am. That's forgiveness. That's freedom. The waves crashed gently below, echoing her words in the rhythm of the tide. Mae leaned back, her fingers brushing against the table, where the candle glowed brighter now against the coming night. The camera lingers on her face, lined with time, but lit by peace. Her eyes reflect the sea, the stars, and the small flame between them, all symbols of endurance. Tell me in the comments, would you have stayed, or walked away like I did? Because sometimes, strength isn't in holding on, it's in knowing when to let go. Mae turned slightly toward the camera, not breaking the fourth wall, but acknowledging it gently, like a friend who understands. And if stories like this remind you to choose peace over pride, subscribe, before the next one finds you unprepared to let go. The camera pulls back slowly. The candlelight becomes smaller, the sea larger. The sound of waves fills the silence as the screen fades to black. But before it does, the final image remains, that single candle by the sea, glowing bravely against the wind. A voice, her voice, returns one last time. Built by hands that once trembled and found peace again.